The winning blueprint presents.
Draft Zone.
Welcome to the Draft Zone. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. You are in the lab room in the Draft Zone. Comprehensive wall-to-wall draft coverage here in the lab room. As you can see, this is a big deal. It's the draft. I've got on the shirt with the button up with the tie. It's important. It matters in the National Football League. I'm here today to discuss my chalk draft. And now you ask yourself, chalk? What about a mock draft? I separate and differentiate between the two. For me, a chalk draft is 1 to 32, each team picking exactly where they're supposed to pick. No moves being made, no trades being consummated. Everything is just the way it's supposed to be. So if you're at pick 1 and you're the Chiefs, you pick at pick 1. There's no trading out of that spot. You take a player, next team up. That's a chalk draft. A mock draft, in my estimation, is a draft that sees different things happening, teams trading in and out of picks. That's a mock draft, a true mock draft at its core to me. And I'll get to that on a separate episode, but this is for the chalk draft. And right here in front of you is my chalk draft that I've assembled. And behind you, I don't think you can really see it that well, but on that board behind me is my mock draft, and we'll get to that in a separate episode. So let's talk about this draft. I think there's a lot of different scenarios that could play out, but we're going to get to the chalk draft first. So there's no trading involved, just teams making solid selections at their pick. So we'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's talk Chiefs. Up at number 1, the Chiefs desperately want to get out of this pick. They so badly want to get out of this pick, but they can't. And this is a chalk draft, so no one's getting out of anything. So the Chiefs will select the left tackle, Luke Jocal, out of Texas A&M. Solid selection. They've already talked about moving Brendan Albert over to the right side. This allows them to do that. They get their man, Luke Jocal, out of Texas A&M at the tackle position. Big, long, physical left tackle. Got it done at A&M, protecting the Heisman Trophy winner, Johnny Manziel. And so they're getting a very good player at the top of the draft in Luke Jocal. You look at the number 2 selection in this draft, and the number 2 team is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another team that wouldn't mind trading back in. The Chiefs and the Jaguars would want to trade out of their positions for different reasons. The Chiefs would want to do it just because there's not a guy that we have to take at the top of this draft. On the other hand, the Jacksonville Jaguars would like to do it just because they're not a good football team and they need to acquire as many picks and as many players as possible. But that's not going to happen. And so they're going to have to select someone at 2. And Gus Bradley is a defensive-minded coach. And he wants a guy that can get after the quarterback. Remember, in Seattle last year, where he was the defensive coordinator, who did he draft, or who did he vouch for the Seattle Seahawks drafting last year in the first round? Bruce Irvin, the rush end out of West Virginia. Same premise here. You get the pass rusher, the guys on the back end benefit because of it. And so, because of that notion, the Jacksonville Jaguars were a team last year that did not have over 30 sacks last season. I venture to say they were a lot closer to 20 than 30, which is a horrendous number for a whole team. J.J. Watt might have had more sacks by himself than the Jacksonville Jaguars did as a team. Tyson Alualu, your first-round selection last year, had the most sacks on your team. Can't happen at the defensive tackle position. Cannot happen. They're going to select Dion Jordan, the outside linebacker / defensive end out of Oregon. Here's a guy that's going to come in. He's long, he's wiry, he's lanky, in the mold of a Aldon Smith type of guy. I think he's going to be a menace at the next level. If he's coached up correctly, if he's put in the right scheme, Dion Jordan could be a guy that could get you double-digit sacks. I love the way this guy is built physically. He could get in the weight room, yes, but you don't get 6'6", long arms. Liken him to Jason Taylor, if you will. This guy has all the physical tools necessary to be a double-digit sack getter in the National Football League. The Jacksonville Jaguars will do themselves some good drafting Dion Jordan at the second pick. You look at the third selection in the draft, and that belongs to the Oakland Raiders. And I feel like this one is a consensus. Everyone around the league, including myself, feels like this is an easy pick for the Raiders. They went to his pro day. It's going to be the defensive tackle out of Florida, Sharif Floyd. I think this one is a no-brainer for the Raiders. You got to get stout at the point of attack. You can't allow teams to run the football all over you. You lose Tommy Kelly. No more Richard Seymour. You need to get some beef in the middle of that defense. You went out and got some guys in free agency. But Sharif Floyd is going to be the alpha male on that defensive line. He's going to be the third selection of the draft to the Oakland Raiders. Sharif Floyd, defensive tackle out of Florida. You look at the number 4 selection in this draft, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles. How often do the Eagles draft this high in the draft? Not often. And so they have to hit a home run here. So you look at the Eagles, and you say to yourself, what do the Eagles need? They're switching from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense. You need beef. You need girth. You need strong guys up front that are going to hold up blockers, allow the linebackers to roam free, and guys that can get occasional pressure on the quarterback and collapse that pocket. You need guys that are difference makers on that defensive line. Think Star Latu-Lele. Think this is a solid pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, the defensive tackle out of Utah. This is a guy that you can put at the 5 technique. You can put him over the center at the 0 if you'd like. But I think where he's going to flourish in the league is at the 5 technique, and he's going to create havoc. This is a guy that is very quick for his size, very agile, gets in the backfield, plays on the other side of the line of scrimmage. The Philadelphia Eagles making that transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4. Star Latu-Lele is going to be a guy that can help the Philadelphia Eagles tremendously, and I think that's who the Eagles will select at number 4. So you look at the number 5 pick, and it's the Detroit Lions. They could go in several different directions. You lose Cliff Averill in the offseason. Kyle Vanden Bosch is no longer on your football team. You need a defensive end. You look at it on the other side of the field, at offense, you lose Jeff Backus to retirement. You also lose Gosher Cherilus to free agency. You need a tackle. So what do you do? Which one's more important? A defensive end or an offensive tackle? Well, that's a no-brainer. If you are the Detroit Lions, you got to protect Matthew Stafford in that offense. No Matthew Stafford means no wins for the Detroit Lions. The easy choice here is an offensive tackle. You go with the next one that's best on your board. If you're the Detroit Lions, I'm thinking that's Eric Fisher, the offensive tackle out of Central Michigan. I think he's going to be the selection here for the Detroit Lions at the number 5 slot. You could argue that they need a corner as well, but you got to protect Matthew Stafford. That's your most prized commodity. You got to protect him. You got to go get the tackle. Eric Fisher is going to be there. I think he's the selection at 5. So you look at the number 6 team to select in this draft, and it belongs to the Cleveland Browns. And they've been looking for a cornerback to go across from their star in their mind at the cornerback position, Joe Hayden. And what better way to do that and address that than a top 10 pick in the draft? And getting the best corner in this draft in DeMarcus D. Milner out of Alabama. You need a cornerback. You feel like you need a tandem that can get it done out wide. Here's a guy that can help you achieve that. D. Milner is Arguably the best corner in this draft. Others would argue against that, but I think that for the value of this pick, D. Milner is the guy at 6 for the Cleveland Browns. You look at the 7th selection in this draft, and it's the Arizona Cardinals. And a week ago, 2 weeks ago, this looked like maybe a landing destination for a guy like Geno Smith. But you fast forward a week or two later, all of a sudden now Carson Palmer is your starting quarterback. There's no more questions at that quarterback position. So now you look to upgrade your roster and give yourself a chance to win now. And what's the next pressing need on this team? Offensive line. And this was a very porous group, especially after the injury to Levi Brown last year. And so you get Levi Brown back, but you still need a tackle. That's why Lane Johnson at 7, the tackle out of Oklahoma, makes the most sense at this 7th spot. And that's exactly where I feel like the Arizona Cardinals are going to go. Lane Johnson is going to be their selection at 7. It's a good pick. He's athletic. He can move. He can play both right and left tackle. Solid pick by the Arizona Cardinals at 7, getting the tackle out of Oklahoma, Lane Johnson. So you move on to number 8, Buffalo Bills. And you're thinking to yourself, man, this is where Geno Smith has to go, right? Wrong. They go out, they get Tavares Jackson. They go out, they go get Kevin Kolb. Does Geno Smith need to be in this environment with those quarterbacks in front of him? Maybe. Maybe not. But at the end of the day, if you're the Bills, are you in love with Geno Smith? Is he your franchise guy? Do you believe that Geno Smith is the starting quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, not only in the present, but into the future? Are you in love with Geno Smith at 8? I think going out and getting these quarterbacks the way you have, going out and spending money on a guy like Kevin Kolb, going out and getting a guy like Tavares Jackson, says to me that maybe you're not in love with drafting a quarterback at 8. Maybe there's a guy that you feel very strongly about, but just not at 8. And so you lose Andy Levitre in free agency. He was a big part of your offense, a big part of your offensive line. So what do? You replace Andy Levitre at 8 with a good, solid offensive lineman like Chance Warmack out of Alabama. I think that's where the Bills are going to go with this 8th selection. You lose a guy like Andy Levitre, you got to replace him. You can't have that hole, that vacancy on your offensive line. You replace him with a guy like Chance Warmack at 8. So you look at the 9th selection in the draft, and it belongs to the New York Jets. And this is a bad football team with a lot of holes, a lot of needs, but you can only fill one with this 9th selection. Rex Ryan is a defensive-minded coach. He wants defensive help. He wants his defense to be back in the top 5. He's not used to his defense being run all over, being passed all over. And so he wants to get to the quarterback. They haven't had a guy that can get to the quarterback. And they're going to select a guy that can get to the quarterback with this 9th selection. And I think, even though he might be falling on some draft boards, you can't deny the tape. You can't deny production. And that's why Jarvis Jones, the outside linebacker / defensive end out of Georgia, is going to be the guy that Rex Ryan selects at this 9th selection. You look at the 10th pick in this draft, it's the Tennessee Titans. And even though they went out and got Andy Levitre, a big free agent fish, at the guard position, you still got questions. And you want a guard. And maybe you wanted Chance Warmack. Not going to be there. So you take the next best thing. And maybe even if Chance Warmack was there and you had your pick of the litter, a lot of people are high on this next guy. And I'm talking about Jonathan Cooper, the offensive guard from North Carolina. He's shooting up draft boards right now. The versatility, this guy can play center, this guy can play guard. The athleticism that he's shown at the combine, at his pro day, he's got teams salivating. And I think the Tennessee Titans, their head coach, being an offensive-minded, offensive line coach, he's a guy that's an offensive lineman at heart. He played in this league for a long time at the offensive line position, did Mike Munchak. He wants this line to be stout. He went out and got Andy Levitre. He's going to add Jonathan Cooper to that mix. Look for Chris Johnson to have a big season behind this revamped offensive line. You look at number 11, and you look at the San Diego Chargers. They want a tackle in the worst way, but you're not going to get a tackle. Not one of the elite, not one of the top 3 at 11. You can't go reaching for a guy like DJ Fluker at 11. It's too early for that. So you got to take another pressing need. And if you're the San Diego Chargers, you've got several. But the next biggest need that comes to mind after the tackle position is cornerback. No more Quentin Jammer. No more Antoine Cason. You need to replace that position. Now, you replenished it to some degree with Derek Cox in free agency. But guess what? You need more. Think Xavier Rhodes with this pick, the big, tall, rangy, long cornerback out of Florida State. I like this selection for the San Diego Chargers. It gives you a tandem like you used to have with Cromartie and Jammer. It gives you that kind of flexibility in your secondary. Let's see if you can build off of that with that selection. So now we look at the 12th selection in the draft, and it belongs to the Miami Dolphins. And here's a team that would love to get their hands on a tackle as well. But just like in the case of the San Diego Chargers, you're not going to get a tackle, or at least one of the 3 top tackles in this draft, sitting at 12. It's just not going to occur. So what do? You go after another need, or in this case, a luxury if you are the Miami Dolphins. You've been aggressive in the offseason. And so really, you've got some needs along this team, but you can never have enough pass rushers. You want your secondary to be really solid, you go out and get guys who can get to the quarterback. And so, with the 12th selection, the Miami Dolphins select Ezekiel Ziggy Ansah, the very raw but athletically gifted and physical specimen out of BYU. Here's a guy that can come in opposite of Cameron Wake. You got Randy Starks and Paul Soliai inside. They could be a very dangerous defensive line if Ziggy Ansah comes in and plays some good football. The Dolphins get a very good, very raw, but a guy with a huge ceiling and upside at 12 in Ziggy Ansah. So now you look at 13, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You don't have a corner. Let's face it. You need 2 starting corners. Eric Wright didn't pan out. You wasted your money. It's okay. You don't have the receipt. You can't take it back to the store and get your money back. But you realize you made a mistake. No more E.J. Biggers. You need a cornerback. You traded away Aqib Talib during the season last year. Corner's a glaring need. So it only makes sense that at 13, you snag the cornerback out of Washington, Marcus Trufant. Some have him as their number 1 corner in the draft. Some have him as their number 2. In this particular format, he's the 3rd best corner in the draft. Either way, the Buccaneers are getting a very good, solid, man-to-man cover guy that can get it done at the cornerback position. That fills one of your voids. You still need another corner. But that is a good selection for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 13. So you look at the Panthers at 14. And I can hear Panthers fans screaming now, take the receiver! Take the receiver! Pipe down, pipe down. Your new general manager, Dave Gettleman, is an old school throwback general manager. Now, I've got intel on this one that as bad as you want a receiver, he's an old school general manager that feels like you build a team from the inside out. And what I mean by that is the defensive and offensive lines. You've got a solid offensive line to this point. Now you got to build up this defensive line. You let go of Dewan Edwards, but you realize quickly, hey, this guy was really good for us at the defensive tackle position. You re-signed Dewan Edwards. Now you want a stout beast to go next to him. So you're going for Sheldon Richardson, the defensive tackle out of Missouri. Now, I know you would love to go Cordell Patterson or Tavon Austin or someone of that nature here, but Dave Gettleman is a guy that's a purist, and he thinks you build from within and work your way out. And with that philosophy, he's going to go defensive line, and Sheldon Richardson is the best defensive tackle on the board at that point. A solid pick, and he's a guy that's a difference maker at the defensive tackle position. Not only is he stout at the point of attack, but he can knife in and cause havoc in your backfield and get to the quarterback as well. So you look at the number 15 team to select, the New Orleans Saints. They're switching from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense. When you do that, you need guys that can come in and get to the quarterback. So at 15, it makes a lot of sense that Barkevious Kiki Mingo is the selection for the New Orleans Saints. Here's a guy that at times shut it down at LSU, and he admitted that. He didn't play at his best at all times. You don't want to hear that if you're a team looking to make this guy your selection. But you can't ignore the tape. You can't ignore what this guy has been able to do. Yes, he does need to get in the weight room. But a guy being able to get to the quarterback is something that the Saints need to have. They went out and got a guy like Butler from the Cowboys, but they need someone on that other side. They've got some guys, Junior Gillette and some other guys on that roster that might be able to get to the quarterback. But Barkevious Kiki Mingo is a guy that could be a game changer for you. Saints take him at 15. You look at 16, and this is the first of 2 selections in the first round by the St. Louis Rams. And you ask yourself, what do the Rams need? Well, the Rams need a pass catcher. And they have plenty of them. They got Givens. They got Quick. They've got Austin Pettis. But none of those guys are true difference makers. You need something elite. Something Sam Bradford can get the ball to on a 5-yard pass and watch them run for 57 yards. So at this 16th selection, you think receiver? No, not Cordell Patterson. Think Tavon Austin. You lose Danny Amendola, one of the most dynamic slot receivers in the league. What do you replace him with? The new best slot receiver in this league. Yes, I'm saying that right now. That's how good I feel about Tavon Austin. This guy's a playmaker. Yes, he's a little light in the pants. He's a small guy. But he can make things happen. He's dynamic. He gives you value, extra value, and the returns game. You can't miss with Tavon Austin, and the Rams won't at 16. So you look at the 17th selection in this draft, and it belongs to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is a team that is in transition mode. I won't say rebuilding because the Steelers don't rebuild. They're in a transitional phase. A lot of older guys being purged off of this roster. They're trying to find that balance between a young and an older roster. They're trying to merge the two together. But you lose Mike Wallace. You've got a guy like Emmanuel Sanders dangling out there as a restricted free agent. Will he be back? You're not sure. You need more talent out wide for Ben Roethlisberger. You can't ignore that. Yeah, you could use a safety right now because we saw what Troy Polamalu went through last year. We know Ryan Clark is getting up there in age. You could probably use a corner as well. But at this point, corner isn't good value at this pick because 3 of them have already come off the board. You look at the safety position, you could get the best safety in the draft right here. But why not get a potential game-changing receiver in Cordell Patterson to replace a guy like Mike Wallace? You need it. He's there. You take Cordell Patterson at 17 if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. So now you look at 18. Dallas Cowboys. And what's been the one position of need, the one weakness glaring on this Cowboys team over the last decade, let's call it? The safety position. And at 18, even though there's been swirling rumors around the tackle position, they're looking to address that through free agency now that they've freed up some cap space with that Tony Romo deal. They're talking to Eric Winston right now. So why not go and address the safety position? You get the best safety in the draft in Kenny Vaccaro. Here's a guy that can come down. He's not afraid to lay a lick on someone, can run out of space. We saw this guy cover Tavon Austin in the slot. He can run with guys. This is a can't-miss prospect at the safety position. Never mind the sluggish time at the combine. He was dealing with an injury. Kenny Vaccaro plays fast. If you put on the tape, you know what you're getting. Kenny Vaccaro, a very, very good and intriguing pick for the Dallas Cowboys at 18. So now you look at the 19th selection in the draft. And it's one of the running mates of the Cowboys in the NFC East. It belongs to the New York Giants. And you say to yourself, Giants, what do they normally select? Defensive ends. It's like they draft them every year. Doesn't matter how many they have. They can never have enough. You lose O.C. Umenyiora and you're thinking they need to replenish. They need to reload. They need to restock. Bjorn Warner is sitting right there. Seems like a logical pick. It's what the Giants always do. It's a no-brainer. They take Bjorn Warner. Hold on a second. If you're the Giants, how long can you parade? what you have at the linebacker position on the field. How long can you go on with what you have at linebacker? You re-signed a guy like Keith Rivers, but you know that I know that you know that I know that he's not the answer at the linebacker position. You signed Dan Connor. What does Dan Connor do for you? Not much. Chase Blackburn is gone. He's in Carolina now. So you've got some decisions to make. You need a linebacker. You need to stop acting as if you have linebackers out there because you don't. Michael Boley is no longer on your football team. Think Alec Ogletree, not Bjorn Warner at 19 for the Giants. Alec Ogletree is the guy that if you're not comfortable putting inside, you put him out at the will linebacker position. Let him cover some tight ends. Let him create havoc out there. You feel good about him inside, just slide him over to the middle linebacker position and let him work there. He's a guy that I think you need to keep clean, though. He's an ex-safety out of Georgia. You need to keep Alec Ogletree clean. And so I think you slide him out to that will linebacker position on the weak side and let him cover those mismatched nightmare tight ends out there and have him be a very good defender out there in space, which is what the Giants need on their football team. So you look at the 20th team to select in this draft, and it's the Chicago Bears, and they look at the Giants and they say, hey, Bjorn Warner, you don't want him? We'll take him. Slide him on over here. And that's exactly what the Bears will do with the 20th selection in this draft. They'll take Bjorn Warner, the defensive end out of Florida State. He's a long, wiry guy, 6'4". He's got a lot of upside, a lot of promise. He's a try-hard and hustle guy, high motor. He's got the skills to get it done and at the next level. Julius Peppers isn't getting any younger. Israel Adonijah, you haven't re-signed him yet. Maybe he'll be back. Maybe he won't. You did draft Shea McClellan a year ago, but you can never have enough able bodies that can get to the quarterback. Add Bjorn Warner to the mix. You would have loved Alec Ogletree at this spot, but the Giants reached up, snatched him right before you could. You settle for the next best thing, Bjorn Warner at 20. You look at the 21st selection in this draft, and it belongs to the Cincinnati Bengals. And this draft pick is a direct correlation to the struggles of the Bengals in trying to resign Andre Smith. I think the Bengals have gotten to the point now where they're ready to just move on from Andre Smith. He's asking for a lot of money, more than the Bengals are trying to pay him. And at this point, they're ready to tell him, look, you don't want to come back for a reasonable price. We'll just go out and address the tackle position in the draft. And they'll do exactly that with the tackle out of Alabama, DJ Fluker, at 21. He's a plug-and-play guy at that right tackle position. They'll put him in. They won't miss a beat. DJ Fluker, Cincinnati Bengal, at 21. You look at the 22nd selection in this draft, and it's the second of the 2 first-rounders for the St. Louis Rams. They got the receiver with their first one, and at the second pick, you could ask them to go in several different directions. But at the end of the day, they need an outside linebacker. But there's no value at outside linebacker at 22. So then you move to the next spot that they could use help at, and you look at the safety position. Kenny Vaccaro is already gone off the board, so you need that second best safety. For some, it's Jonathan Cyprien out of Florida International. For others, it's Matt Elam out of Florida. For me, that guy is Eric Reed out of LSU. There's no more Craig Dahl. He's moved on to San Francisco. You let go of your other safety and Quentin Michael. Now you're talking to him. You want him back, but he's not back yet. You need a safety. You've got a relatively young group, a young, hungry group with a good mixture of veteran presence back there. Why not add Eric Reed to that mix, plug him in, let him play, and let him be dynamic at the safety position? I think Jeff Fisher is a guy that normally would go with a running back here. And they need a running back. But there's not a running back worthy of a first-round selection here. And we've seen Jeff Fisher take running backs in the first round in the past. Eddie George, Chris Johnson. But that's not going to occur here. There's not a running back worthy of a first-round selection. You go safety. You go Eric Reed. So now you go to the 23rd pick. And it's a team with 2 first-round selections in the Minnesota Vikings. And you could go one of 2 ways here if you're the Vikings. You've got a glaring need at wide receiver. You need 2 of them. You went out, you got a guy like Greg Jennings in free agency, so you've addressed one. But last time I checked, 1 plus 1 is 2. You got one, you need another one. But there's plenty of value in this draft at the receiver position. So you don't need to take receiver at 23. In fact, you could wait till a little later for that. Instead, you need to address another position. You lose Jasper Brinkley, your middle linebacker, to the Arizona Cardinals in free agency. You need a middle linebacker. Even though he's had some struggles at the combine, a lot of controversy surrounding some things off the field, you can't ignore the fact that Manti Te'o got it done in college. He made amends for that poor showing at the combine at his pro day. You take Manti Te'o here at 23, and I think that's what the Minnesota Vikings are going to do. Get a middle linebacker that can come in and help them right away at that position. So you look at 24. And the Indianapolis Colts are making the transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense. Last year was the first year. And normally, when you make that transition, it's a little rough because you got a lot of 4-3 parts. A lot of guys that are used to having their hands in the ground. Now you're asking them to stand up and rush from that outside linebacker position. You may even be asking them to drop. They're not comfortable. It's a little awkward. Then you don't have the beefy guys that you need up front. So now they're in year 2. They went out and made some additions to this team to help solidify this 3-4 defense in the front 7. You're looking for that one guy to send you over the top. Think Sylvester Williams, the defensive tackle out of North Carolina, who's been shooting up draft boards. Here's a guy that's a big, beefy defensive tackle you stick in the middle of your defense. He can move laterally. He's not going to be moved off of his spot at the point of attack. Solid selection for the Colts at 24, getting a guy that can help provide some girth in that 3-4 defense. So you look at 25, and you go back to the Minnesota Vikings, the second of their first-round selections. Now you get the receiver that you need. And why not get another good receiver that has the potential to be a number 1 receiver in this league, in the receiver out of Cal, Keenan Allen. Here's a guy that can come in. He's got all the credentials of a number 1 receiver. He can run. He can catch it. He's 6'2", large frame, solid selection for the Minnesota Vikings. You put him alongside of Greg Jennings, you could have a nice tandem at the receiver position. So now we go to the Green Bay Packers at 26. You lose Charles Woodson. You let him go. He's getting up there in age. He's making too much money. You need a safety. 2 safeties have already been taken off the board. So you go with the next best thing. Which one is the best available safety on your board at this point? Is it Jonathan Cyprien out of FIU? Or is it Matt Elam out of Florida? I think it's Matt Elam out of Florida. You take him, you plug him in at 26 to the Green Bay Packers, you move on. So you get to 27 with the Houston Texans, and you look at them and you say, man, the Texans could use a guy across from Dre. How long has it been since Dre had a guy across from him that could get it done? Never. And so you say, why not take a receiver here? I tell you why you don't take a receiver at 27. Because there's value in this draft at receiver. You can get a guy that can go across from Dre at a later date and time in this draft. 27 isn't the time to do that. Instead, you need a tackle. Eric Winston, gone. You let him go 2 years ago. You still are laboring from that release. You need a tackle. Think Menelik Watson, the tackle out of Florida State here. He's a raw tackle, hasn't been playing football that long, from England. He's a soccer guy, of course. You come from overseas, most likely. Soccer is your true love, but he's got all the skills that you need from a right tackle. He's got good feet. They could be better. He's a little grabby, but at the end of the day, I think Menelik Watson is an upgrade over what you have at tackle. And this Texans team needs a tackle to thrive in that offense. Menelik Watson is your selection, I think, at 27. So then you go to 28 in the Denver Broncos. This is a tough one because you shouldn't have to spend your pick on what you're about to spend your pick on. But when you make boneheaded decisions, and maybe your hand was forced, maybe it wasn't, at the end of the day, it was a snafu on both parties involved. You lose Elvis Dumervil. He's no longer a Denver Bronco. Look, That's 10.5, 11 sacks. You got to replace that. Von Miller is getting it done on one side. You need that guy on the other side that's getting that pressure. You got to replace him. Think Cornelius Tank Carradine, defensive end out of Florida State. How many Florida State players is that in this first round? 4, 5? I don't know. Either way, here's a guy that if he didn't tear his ACL, I think would have ascended into a different stratosphere. He's got all the physical gifts you look for. 6'4", built like a horse, like a stallion. He can get around that edge. He's very dangerous. I think the Denver Broncos will do themselves some justice by replacing Elvis Dumervil with Tank Carradine at 28. So now you look at the 29th selection in this draft. And it's the New England Patriots. And this is what the Patriots do. They get a guy that everyone else isn't that high on. They clean him up, they shine him up, and all of a sudden, he's a really good player. Demontre Moore has fallen like he's got a boulder attached to his hip and he jumped off of a cliff. I mean, this guy is plummeting faster than the speed of light. So, at 29, doesn't it make sense that the Patriots draft a guy that it seems like no one else wants to take a chance on in the first round? A guy that was highly productive in college, but only benched 2 1/4, 12 times at the combine. Yeah, didn't run a fast 40 at the combine either. Seems just like what the Patriots would do. And that's exactly why Demontre Moore will be opposite of a guy they drafted in the first round last year in Chandler Jones. And he'll be looking to wreak havoc for the New England Patriots. And most likely, he probably will, which makes absolutely no sense. But that's why the Patriots are who they are, and they do what they do because they're really good at what they do. And at 29, they're going to take a guy like Demontre Moore out of Texas A&M and make him a really good defensive end. So now you look at 30, Atlanta Falcons. You got lucky. Tony G decided to come back. But he's only coming back for 1 year. This is it. This is it. Your last year of Tony. This is it. So what do you have to do at 30? You got to go and get a replacement for him. Tyler Eifert, the best tight end in this draft, is sitting there waiting for you to take him. Why not? He learns from the best in the business, future Hall of Famer in Tony Gonzalez. Doesn't get much better than that. You're looking for a great replacement? He can be exactly that in 1 year's time. You take him now, you can have 2 tight end sets where you got 2 pass-catching threats on the field, and he gets to learn from Tony Gonzalez. Best of both worlds. It's a no-brainer. You take Tyler Eifert if you are the Atlanta Falcons at 30. So now you get to 31. Super Bowl runner-up. The worst pick in the draft every year. That means you didn't get it done in the Super Bowl. San Francisco 49ers sit at the 31st pick. And there's not really a lot of things you can say the San Francisco 49ers need. But there is one position of note. You lose your safety, and a really good one, in Deshaun Golson, and you got to replace him. You went out and got Craig Dahl in free agency. Is he really the answer, though? I mean, if you want a stopgap, sure. But we're looking long-term here. You got a first-round selection. You got a guy sitting right here for the taking. The safety out of Florida International University, Jonathan Cyprien, right there in your lap. Why not take him? So, hence, the 49ers will select, with their 31st overall selection in this draft, the safety out of Florida International, Jonathan Cyprien. Here's a guy with a lot of range, can make things happen. He's more known for being able to come up and lay the lumber to opposing receivers and tight ends. But he can go out and make some plays out in some space. He's not the fastest, but he's a guy that can make plays. I think Jonathan Cyprien is the selection at 31. And so then you go ahead and you close out the first round with the Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens. And you think about their needs, and they lost a lot of guys in free agency. A lot of guys. You could look linebacker. You could look at cornerback. You could look at safety. You just saw a safety go off the board right in front of you. 4 safeties have already went off the board. So safety isn't a good value here at 32. So then you look at a position that you really could use some help at. You lose Anquan Bolden, and that hurts. He was a big part of why you won the Super Bowl. You currently don't have a number one receiver, if you want to be honest, on the roster. I like Torrey Smith. I like him a lot. He's not a number one receiver, though. So this is why at 32, you draft the wide receiver out of Clemson, DeAndre Hopkins, and you make him your new Anquan Bolden. He's not the fastest, but he's a big physical receiver that catches everything within a 5-mile radius of him. I say this is the most ideal pick for you at 32. You get a guy that can start for you day one, come in and make an immediate difference, give Joe Flacco a target that you need out wide, and you get a player that you need and fill a position of need on your roster. And that is my chalk draft. Picks 1 to 32, every single team in the slot that they're supposed to be picking. It's amazing. No quarterback in there. If you were listening, hey, where does Geno Smith and all these quarterbacks fit in? They don't. And do I think that's honestly going to happen? No, I don't. That's why this is my chalk draft. This isn't the way I think the draft is going to unfold. But if every team picked where they're supposed to, I think that could honestly happen. But it's not going to occur that way. And that's why I have a mock draft. Stay tuned for that very mock draft up next.
Draft Zone.